Hello, my name is Eric and I'm doing another one of my photography challenges slash vlog. It's called the One Body, One Lens, One Roll, One Day. Today I am at Austin Badger Park. It is on the outskirts of Medina City. They've got bike trails which are closed because it rained recently and there's mud and stuff like that. But it's kind of a cool park. It's a little bit of a hike to kind of get up to where I am, so be aware there's lots of elevation at this one. Today's camera, I'm going a little bit more classic on this one, is a Pentax ME Super. It's an all manual camera. It does have some auto features in, but you're going to be winding it, rewinding it, manual focusing. And I've got a Sears 50mm f2. Now Sears lenses were not made by Sears back in the day. Typically these would be made by another photographic company, and then other companies would buy them, put their name on them. A lot of companies did that. If you remember a couple episodes ago, I did one on the Minolta QTSI with a quad-array lens that was made by Sigma back in the day. I believe the Sears lenses were made by Chinon. Someone may want to correct me on that, but I believe they were Chinon lenses in disguise. Today's film is Ilford's Ortho Plus. It is an orthochromatic film. Most black and whites are panchromatic. The difference between a panchromatic and an orthochromatic is not red sensitive, which means anything that is red or orange is going to go extremely dark. Now, I don't see much reds or oranges where I am at the moment, so you may not see the results, but it's a fun film to try. So nice high contrast. Now also, because it is not red sensitive, in normal conditions outside like today, you'd be shooting it at ISO 80. I have my camera set for ISO 64, just slide over exposure like I typically do. But in a tungsten situation, so let's say maybe a sunset or interior, they say use ISO 40 just because of the fact that it has a lot more orange in it and the film is not as sensitive, so gotta give it a little extra time to absorb that tone. Nice black and white film, lots of greenery, nice walking area. I see a couple dog walkers floating around. Let's see what I can get. So the aftermarket lenses, the Sears, the Osawas, and a bunch of other, I'll call them third-party lenses, were never the best of lenses. Most manufacturers that made them for them kept the best stuff for themselves, but they were designed to be an inexpensive alternate to the name brand lenses. Being an f2, it's still relatively fast, but a lot of other 50mm are 1.7, 1.8, it's about a half stop faster. Now the nice thing about a 50mm is that's on a film camera and also on full frame digital cameras, that's about the same as what you would see through one human eye. So boom, there's your 50mm. Now if you tend to use wider angle lenses, 35mm is about the same as two eyes. So depending upon the style of photography you like to do, whether or not you want slightly wider or slightly more normal. A lot of street photographers like those two because it's the same view. There's no wide angle distortion, there's no long compression. If you start going too wide, you will start to see some curvature on the side, some distortion because of the way the optics have to be formed to get it that wide. Most cases in film bodies or in full frame cameras, you don't start noticing that till you get to 24, depending upon the quality of the lens, maybe down to 21, but even then you might start to see something in the corners. All right, this is the standard 50. This is going to be about the same view, just walking around. There is a train trestle floating around. I see some graffiti floating around. Path continues. Let me see what else I can get. Now I'm seeing some big birds floating around. Maybe there's a, I don't know if they're eagles or something like that. Cool thing is that I can always come back here with maybe a longer lens and try to get them. They're kind of just floating around in the sky there. This is a coated lens. There's a couple of coatings on it. If you check the reflection, you'll see some colored reflections coming off of it. But it looks like more than half of them are not coated, which means I'm getting a white reflection off of it. A little different than the Pentax SMC glass. This is regular coated, not super multi-coated. So I might get some cool flaring going on, because that's what coatings are designed to reduce on. Okay, so this is a 50mm f2 lens, so it means I can open up to f2, but in most cases, I'm going to say like 99% of the time, lenses aren't quite as sharp at full wide open. They're not really optimized for that. The standard lenses typically have a nice little bell curve when it comes to sharpness for your aperture. So one end, the bottom end is your, let's say in this case, f2. The top end, again in this case, is probably now f16, because this lens can't do 22 or 32. But if you follow the bell curve, then typically about 2 stops from wide open. So in this case, this is an f2 lens, 2 stops from wide open is about f4, 2/8 in between. And then for the next 2 stops, so f4, f5, 6, and f8 is the sweet spot for this lens for sharpness versus aperture. There's an old National Geographic adage from the 80s and 90s. It was f8 and be there. Most of the lenses back then were f4, so f8 hit that sweet spot. And of course, you had to be where the where the action was or where the animals were. Otherwise, it didn't do you any good. The small exception to that are what's called nocturnal lenses. Nikon has a couple. I'd have to see who else has Noct lenses, NOCT. I think Leica has one, maybe even Carl Zeiss had one. And instead of a typical bell curve for sharpness on the aperture, it was more of a slant. It was optimized for that wide open aperture and the bottom like 2. So those were typically 1.4 lenses, maybe even 1.2. So basically anything below f2 or maybe below f2.8 was its sweet spot, and kind of started to taper off as you continued higher up the f-stop scale, because those lenses were optimized at the shallow end. All right, about halfway through, I'm going to get some more shots. Let's see what else I can get. Again, today's camera is the Pentax ME Super. This is one of a family of about 3 or 4 of this body style. There's the standard ME, which is an aperture priority only camera, kind of like the Nikon EM I did in a previous episode. You set the aperture, camera's going to pick your shutter speed. The Nikon EM also had a mechanical shutter speed. This one does not, so if my battery dies, I'm kind of stuck. This one is the ME Super, which now does have a shutter option, so now I can shoot things all manual. Probably half my shots I've shot manual, the other half I've just done aperture priority. There's a Super Program and a Super Program A or Program A. Those start to have like little LED readouts, a little bit more electronics in them. Again, those typically need the batteries for the shutter timing, so none of the ME or ME Super or Super Program style bodies could fire without a battery, but that's okay. Have a spare battery. Typically they would use 2 small little button cell batteries, known by a couple different names. The PX13, not the PX13, the SR44, the V76. I'd have to double check, maybe PX13. Those were typically where you'd stack 2 of them up and put them in there. I've got 2 SR44s in here. The numbers change by manufacturer and by what chemistry they use, whether it's a silver oxide, whether it's an alkaline, or something of that sort. You can also use a CR1/3 lithium battery. It's kind of like 2 of those batteries stuck together. And then either way, you're going to get roughly 40 to maybe 50 rolls of film out of each one, because you're not running any screen. It just, pulsing it for the shutter release. So they do last quite some time. I usually would tell people, hey, if you're shooting pretty heavily, pretty consistent, yeah, one roll a week type of thing, maybe once a year, do it as a stocking stuffer or something like that. All right, let me get back to it. A couple more shots left. All right, well, I found the bike track. We do jumps and stuff like that, but as you can tell, it's still a little damp, so they don't want bikers to use it. At least not till it fully dries out. So if the weather stays nice, maybe another day or two, and this will be ready to go and full of people using it for, you know, doing tricks and stuff. And I am at the end of my film. So remember, with the old manual cameras, there is a button underneath the camera. You got to push it down before you start rewinding it, and that releases a gear that'll let you go backwards. I tend to hold mine in just because of the fact that I don't want it to pop out and tear my film. So as you rewind it, you will feel some soft tension. Usually it takes about 30 or 35 spins around. But eventually you'll feel it, and maybe even hear it let go. There it goes. It'll let go a lot easier now. Just do a couple extra winds just to make sure it's inside the canister, and pop it. And there's your film all nice and rolled up. Okay, if you like the episode, like the location, learned something new. I learned about Pentax or Ortho film. Had to look it up a little bit, see what the difference was. Feel free to like the video, share the video, comment on the video. Results will be posted at the end, and I'll see you next episode. Thanks.